Welcome back to I-24 News. Special coverage on another nerve-wracking night here in the Middle East. Guy Israeli, senior editor here at I-24 News. Let's have some updates.
A very short update. Just moments ago, we are hearing from Egyptian sources that the Israeli hostages set to be released today have been transferred into the hands of the Red Cross. And today we're talking about 5 children and 7 women, 2 of them of Russian national, as part of a separate agreement between Hamas and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
All right, so it's going on as planned so far.
Yes.
Thank you for this update. Now we'll go to the Sheba Hospital. I-24 News' Zach Anders is live there. This is where some hostages are being treated and more are expected tonight, Zach.
And we've been receiving intermittent updates from the medical staff here regarding their conditions, and we're hearing that for the most part, those that have been received are doing well, that they are recovering from this entire ordeal. In the floors above me, we're expecting 4 additional hostages, freed hostages, to arrive sometime tonight at Sheba Medical Center. This is per the director of the hospital, who came out and spoke some time ago. They don't know the ages or the sex of the individuals that will be arriving. We're still waiting on that exact list for who exactly will be received here tonight. We did hear from a high-level source in the Prime Minister's office today, who was speaking on the Kafir Bibas and the Bibas family. They have no indication, they tell us, that the youngest hostage was killed. They also have, he went further to say that some of the reports, the conflicting reports that suggest perhaps Hamas has bargained with or collaborated with other factions inside Gaza to swap hostages, or that hostages are in control of other factions. He does not believe that the individuals, or that Hamas does not know where every single hostage is, and refuted that, but then again could not go further and say that they have definitively received proof of life or evidence of the condition for that 10-month-old infant. Here at the hospital, we've been able to speak to several of the families over the last few days of the hostages released. We've been able to collect some more about that, and here's some of what they had to say.
Without getting into specific details, of course, when you spend your time in captivity, there are consequences, both physical and emotional. So yes, we see.
We're evaluating them for the weight loss, which is about 10 to 17% of body weight for most of them. And then for deficiencies, everybody are getting supplements to start with, and then tailored with the specific types of deficiencies that they have. And we're going to follow this up, but this has a meaning, especially in pediatrics, and the consequences of such undernutrition for such a long time, for more than 50 days.
So part of this and the things that the doctors are looking out for is how these freed hostages respond, not just psychologically, but physically too, as they begin to get regular fluids and meals. They've lost weight. Their conditions coming in are varied. They also explain that for many of the hostages, the amount of food that they received towards the later days of their captivity grew less and less available, and that they are responding to, their bodies have responded to that. They weren't getting as much food in those later days. They also were sleeping in difficult conditions. Some of them report having to sleep on plastic chairs upright. It sounds like a terrible ordeal, but they're here in the hospital now and receiving care.
All right, Zach, thank you very much. At the Sheba Hospital in the center of Tel Aviv. Ambassador Dani Aylon, former Israeli ambassador to Washington. We should say that at this stage, tonight, the deal expires. There's no extension yet. Do you expect an extension?
Well, I would say it all depends on proof of life from Hamas and in the right quantity, if you may. The Israeli stipulation was extension of ceasefire for at least 10 hostages a day being released. So I would say that if Hamas can prove that they have 10 or 20 more, then the ceasefire will be extended. And then the question is, what comes after that? Because once we get into the core of the hostages, or they call them prisoners of war when it comes to our soldiers, this may be a different category. And here, I think it's going to be a totally different type of negotiations. And I'm not sure that Israel will even want to start these negotiations before the second stage of the military operation.
All right. Let's go to New York right now to the UN Monthly Security Council meeting on Israeli-Palestinian issues. I-24 News' Mike Wagenheim is live in New York at the UN with more on that. Mike.
That's right. In fact, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, addressing reporters as we speak. We'll try to catch up with her later on. But this is a high-level meeting here today. This isn't just the standard monthly meeting. Foreign ministers from China and Brazil have come in for this one. High-level delegates from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Palestinian Authority sent their foreign minister. The United Arab Emirates, Jordan sent their foreign minister here today. So this is all focused on the Israel-Gaza war, the Israel-Hamas war, how to move forward, if to move forward at any particular pace. Basically, everybody today is stating in one way or another, we're glad with where we are right now in terms of the ceasefire. Some say you've got to make it permanent. It's got to be a truce. The U.S., at least in Linda Thomas-Greenfield's comments earlier today in the meeting, not willing to go that far. But a lot of stress on humanitarian aid, a lot of stress right now on making sure that the pause lasts as long as it can, given the conditions. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, addressed the Security Council earlier on today. Said, look, this is the anniversary today of the UN vote to partition British Mandatory Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. We, the Jews, Israel, accepted. The Palestinians, the Arabs, are still fighting this battle all these years later, and that's exactly what brought us to October the 7th, still fighting this battle that Israel was willing to negotiate and compromise on, and the Palestinians still aren't. Palestinian foreign minister today, al-Maliki, castrating essentially Israel for its role in the Hamas war so far, castigating Israel as well for the lack of what he says the humanitarian aid has gone through so far to northern Gaza. The UN made a separate statement today through Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General. He actually said that aid is finally filtering through to northern Gaza. He also said, for the first time, a UN official saying that what he called the gender-based violence, essentially the sexual violence, the rape, the sexual assaults that have been documented that took place on October 7th at the hands of Hamas terrorists and other Gazan citizens inside of Israel needs to be thoroughly investigated, a step above of what we heard from the very milquetoast statements earlier on in the week.
Right, but actually that was not well received in Israel. Let's take a listen to the Secretary General Guterres earlier today and talk about it later.
The people of Gaza are in the midst of an epic humanitarian catastrophe before the eyes of the world. we must not look away. Intense negotiations are taking place to prolong the truce, which we strongly welcome. But we believe we need a true humanitarian ceasefire.
Yeah, so people in Israel, including some, feminist organizations here, said that Guterres could have been more decisive on what happened, not just call for an investigation. And this is not the kind of thing you would expect over 50 days after this, right?
No, certainly not. And I think the pressure on him was finally piling on to make some sort of statement. He did say that those sort of sexual-based crimes should be or must be condemned anytime, anywhere. However, though, still very vague in who exactly the perpetrators are in those crimes, even though it's been well documented what happened on October 7th, even what's been let out publicly, let alone what's been kept under seal so far. Antonio Guterres is not the person here that's going to appease Israel. I don't know if any UN official at this point has the ability to do that, given what's taken place not only over the years, but just since October 7th alone. The answers are not going to come from the UN Secretary General's office. The answers may come at some point from the Security Council. Again, the U.S. is not calling for any sort of long-term ceasefire based on the current circumstances, just making sure humanitarian aid gets through. It will be interesting, as some of your guests have alluded to, in the what comes next part of this operation here. What comes next after, the women and children, God willing, have been returned to Israel, and only the men and the soldiers are left at that point. Where does Israel go from there, and what will be the reaction from the Security Council, and how long Joe Biden and his administration and Linda Thomas-Greenfield here at the UN will continue to give their full to almost full backing of Israel's freedom of operation there in Gaza.
Right. Mike Wagenheim in New York, thank you very much. Back to you, Ambassador Ayalon here in the studio. The Secretary General Guterres, he's been an enormous disappointment in Israel.
Enormous disappointment. Well, Portugal, under the socialist movement and different governments, were very much pro-Palestinian, even pro-Hamas, I would say. And we saw the results of this long traditioned policy in the statements of Guterres from day one. By the way, he's talking about the devastation in Gaza. He didn't mention, the devastation in Israel. He didn't even make one, I would say, major speech calling on Hamas to receive the ICRC, the International Red Cross, going into and visiting to see the well-being or the condition of the hostages, let alone getting the list of the hostages, which is just the basics in any kind of war. The Nazis back in the 40s, during World War II, these ruthless Nazis, they allowed Red Cross to come into the POW camps, and so it's not, it's not even imaginable how bad it is on the Red Cross to become such to be rendered into some logistical support, supplying ambulances just to get them back without any imprint in a qualitative way. And again, Guterres here, he says the world is looking the other way. He was looking the other way when the ICRC was needed to be called into action.
Right. Guy, let's talk about the Bibas family, the two kids. Very disturbing news today.
Yes, so the IDF today coming out with the announcement that they have informed the Bibas family about the statement that came out of Hamas, according to Hamas. And of course, this could all be part of their psychological warfare, their sadistic treatment of the Israeli public and the Israeli families. According to the Hamas statement, the Bibas family, namely the mother, Shiri, and her two sons, Kfir, which is really the symbol of this war, a 10-month-old baby, 9 months old when he was kidnapped in the arms of his mother, together with their brother Ariel. According to Hamas, they were killed as a result of an Israeli airstrike, something that Israel obviously cannot confirm. The IDF says they will examine this report, but they have informed the news to the family. On behalf of the family, they said that they are updated with the publicity and they're awaiting for more information to see whether that is confirmed or hopefully not so by military sources. The cousin of Shiri Bibas says Hamas kidnapped them alive. We saw those images, the mother and her two sons in her arms, all alive, all in good health when they were taken. He says Hamas, who abducted them alive, is responsible to return them as well. It should be mentioned here that Hamas and the Islamic Jihad have also, not surprisingly, used that psychological warfare also to spread lies. We had a case of one hostage, Hannah, an elderly woman who PIJ already announced that she actually died in their hands. Just less than a week later, she was released alive. We hope and pray that this would also be the case when it comes to the Bibas family. And one more note about them. They are some of the last children still held by Hamas. This deal, this extension of the deal, was meant to bring back all the Israeli children still held by Hamas. And over the past several days, Hamas have claimed that they are actually in the hands of another terror group in Gaza that they don't have access to. Now they're changing their story and stating that they have died. The IDF will be checking this, but
this is the kind of thing that could delay any agreement on extension of the deal.
It is a factor that could delay this deal. We're waiting. These next few hours will be very telling. And it should be mentioned that the extension of the deal is an interest of Hamas. In the eyes of Hamas, any additional day of extension gets them closer to the ideal of stopping the war altogether. They have two cards on their hands. One is the international pressure that I believe at this point is not strong enough to stop Israel from going ahead with the war. The other one is the hostages. And when it comes to the soldiers, Hamas is going to demand the complete cessation of this war, something that the Israeli government and the Israeli public will not accept.
Cannot accept, absolutely. The Gulf countries are very much involved behind the scenes, especially Qatar. I-24 News, Bastian Bori in Dubai. Good evening, Bastian. What do we know about the Qatari involvement so far, beyond what we've seen on the surface?
Well, Jacob, Qatar is the only country in the world who have good relations with all the actors in this conflict. So the Qataris are doing their best to extend this truce. As Guy just said, an extension is ideal for Hamas, but it's also ideal for the Qataris. A good 10 years ago, Hamas was able to open a representative office in Doha where Khaled Meshal and Ismail Haniyeh now sit. Khaled Meshal, former head of Hamas, who acts as not only as a rich guy, but also as an experienced figure in the eyes of the Palestinians, especially since he escaped an assassination attempt ordered by Netanyahu at the end of the 1990s. And then Ismail Haniyeh, current head of Hamas and in charge of all diplomatic matters. And this representative office wasn't opened by the Qataris and the Palestinians on the sly. It was the Americans who told Qatar to allow Hamas to set up on its soil because Washington needed to establish more concrete contacts with Gaza via the Qataris. And we can see the result today with these hostage releases, which will hopefully continue in the months to come, even if the other side of the coin, if you will, is to see that in the end, Qatar is supporting Hamas in a way, which means that the state of Israel will probably not be able to fulfill the mission it set itself of getting rid of Hamas.
Are there any risks for Qatar in the long term?
Well, the Qataris may find themselves trapped by their own status as negotiators, because if, for whatever reason, if they're forced, for example, by other countries to cut all ties and no longer play the role of negotiator, Saudi Arabia has proved proven in the past that it can punish and isolate Qatar completely. In that case, all the vital benefits that Doha was deriving would go up in smoke. But there are also a lot of benefits for the Qataris, and I'm not just talking about their image as negotiators, which brings in a lot of money because in return the US sells them a lot of weapons at very competitive costs. They defend their interests in all international matters. But there's also an image benefits. Remember, just 2 or 3 years ago, Qatar was talked about almost exclusively in terms of its support for Islamist and terrorist groups in Syria. Today, we hardly talk about all that anymore. Some will find it regrettable, and probably rightly so.
Right. Now, we almost forgot, but there's COP28 going on. How is this affected by the war in Gaza?
COP28 will start tomorrow, and the regional instability following Hamas's attacks and Israel's operation in Gaza will definitely affect the conference because if this war were to become more regional, it would have a greater potential to affect COP28 attendance and therefore its likelihood of success. You'll have days, nights, and weekends of top people in governments addressing the crisis in Gaza rather than the climate crisis. So let's see, I would say. We already know that Friday will be an important day as Isaac Herzog and Mahmoud Abbas will be speaking almost at the same time on the main stage, literally one following the other. And we also know that Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Eli Cohen likely won't be attending the talks. They were supposed to, but due obviously to the current circumstances, they won't be attending the talks.
Right. Bastian Barry in Dubai, thank you very much. Ambassador Dani Ayalon, back to you here. Look, things are happening. Qatar is flying to Israel, sitting down with the head of the Mossad night and day for a long time now. This is an interesting development, maybe something positive long run?
Well, the Americans are really trying. The fact that Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, who has so many things on his plate, just leaving everything, putting it to the side and coming here, is quite substantial. And it's not just for temporary ceasefires. I believe he's already trying to kind of mastermind the day after. Because not with Hamas necessarily. I mean, with Hamas, it's a matter of the negotiations on release of hostages against the ceasefire. But the day after, and the day after, the Americans are actually are going to rely on Qatari administration, Qatari money, maybe Saudi money, understanding that Gaza will need an overall, immense investments. And of course, they do not want to see Israel there. But this is another thing. But before they come to Israel and tell Israel, well, Israel, you should not occupy Gaza, they should tell Israel what will be the regime over there. So I believe this is part of the task for the head of the CIA. By the way, it reminds me, the last time head of CIA was so much immersed in the Middle Eastern affairs was just 3 months before 9/11. And at that time, it was here, the Intifada. George Tenet, which was then the head of the CIA, was staying here day in and day out. And I can tell you, he was kicking himself for being here and not in Washington in this very crucial time leading up to 9/11. Always kind of or second-guessing. What would have happened had he been in Washington and not being sidetracked to this Middle East fiasco?
Speaking of Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this in Brussels today ahead of his visit to Israel tomorrow.
We head back to the region as the humanitarian pause that we helped to negotiate with Qatar and with Egypt has allowed scores of hostages to be released and to be reunited with their families. We're surging humanitarian assistance into Gaza to make sure that its people have what they need to get by. Looking at the next couple of days, we'll be focused on doing what we can to extend the pause so that we can continue to get more hostages out and more humanitarian assistance in.
So, Ambassador Ayalon, the question is always what's cooking? Something is.
Well, the Americans have already said it more than once that basically what they would expect Israel is to have a different modus operandi, a different type of military operation if indeed we go to the second stage to the southern part of Gaza because of the density of the population, and they would not want to see any removal of population. This is also because of a demand by the Egyptians.
Right. Let's pause and listen to Benny Gantz.
Was left dry when seeing the hostages coming home. But this evening, I'd like to appeal to the families of the hostages who are not back yet, to those who still don't know what's happening to them. Your journey, the families of the hostages, is inexplicable. And because of this heavy burden, we cannot but admire your strength and the sincere happiness for those families that did have their hostages back, and the backing you give to the army and to the country in order to bring back your loved ones. And when we'll bring back all the citizens of the North and the South, we all embrace you and strengthen you. The burden of your agony is something we think about every minute, day and night. Another thing that strengthens us is the legacy of the fallen soldiers, where we hear that from so many families, mothers and fathers, siblings, comrades in arms, and spouses who tell us, continue, end your mission for them and for us. What kind of strength we have in this nation, this is inconceivable. We are now at very complex moments in a window of opportunities in the frame of the return of the hostages. We shall do whatever we can in order to finish it. But together with that, we are also ready to go back to the fighting in every given moment, including these very minutes. The State of Israel is waging a very complex, many arenas campaign with the responsibility of maintaining the Zionist project and forging it. People want to kill us. They still do. And we have no other choice. We must continue to fight. It's not revenge we're looking for, but the ensuring of our future. We're not going to stop until we bring security and take away the threat in the north and in the south. We're not coming back until we operate. The fighting will go on. It will be extended to any place that is required in the Gaza Strip. There will not be havens until the inhabitants of all the kibbutzim in the south and villages in the north will be able to come back to their land, until everybody comes back to their home. I would like to relate also to the updating of the budget that passed in the government, that has a few essential points in order to continue with the war, but unfortunately all sorts of allocations of budgets that have nothing to do with the war itself. And therefore, all the ministers in my party voted against. So many are enlisted. Hundreds of thousands of people left their homes. The entire economy is jeopardized. We all have to mobilize. To add budgets because of political agreements that have nothing to do with the war are a stain on this government. I'm aware of the voices that think that we should leave the government. But we are now in the most important war since the beginning of the state. I don't know if ever some of the decisions that I and my colleagues had will ever be exposed. I know that our joining the government is essential, and I know how important it was, the message that we did join to the people in Israel, the soldiers in the front, and the legitimacy and understanding the importance among the international nations. As I said in the past, we went in to this emergency government not because of political reasons, but because of a mutual fate. Those who deal with politics and the days after is not going to deviate my colleagues and me to work for the people of Israel and all the citizens of Israel. Even when your shoulders hurt and it's becoming difficult, I will not leave the stretcher and leave the soldiers and the hostages and the interest of the state of Israel aside, because now we just must to prevail. Together and with the help of God we shall do it. Thank you. Questions? Did you meet the Bibas family because of this message that the family got? What did you say to them about the situation? Can we demand the Hamas to return these babies to Israel as a condition for the continuation of the agreement? First of all, in fact, I did meet the representatives of the Bibas family. It was a very painful meeting, most important in its development, because as we were sitting, actually, we got this media announcement that were not verified, but they're painful. I don't know if it's true or not. Is it part of a psychological warfare that the Hamas is waging against us? We're talking about a wonderful family, agonizing, strong, and strengthening one another. And whatever we could do is just to embrace them and be together with them. We are going to continue to look for intelligence and any sign possible in order to base our knowledge and to continue to act in order to bring back the hostages soon and alive if possible. And we shall continue to fight. And I think that the combination of these two eventually is going to bring back the results. And the second question regarding the budget, is that against the agreement? We decided that this government is going to deal only with things that have to do with the war and its derivations. And I said there's a lot of budget that came for the security. It's extended with a lot of definitions. There's a deficit. I understand the important economic implication, but I'm talking about something very simple. At this time, every resource that we can direct to the family, to the war effort, to the families who were jeopardized, the villages that were devastated, people that their businesses collapsed, all this has to be directed there. In the demands of a lot of members in the government, and these people are justified. I have no dispute with them. Okay, at the time it was okay, but what we're saying at the moment, now, at this very difficult hour, the resources should go to one way, and all the other justified causes. And of course, education is important for the religious as well, and defending. I'm for everything. Later on, we can put it into the budget in an organized way, but we don't need political combinations to get what they need. But at the moment, when we are increasing the deficit and reallocating our resources, because everything that was planned before was different, but the reality changed in October 7. I think we have to remedy that and do it again. We hear the spokesman of the UN Security Councils that if the war continues We are holding a very sincere and important discourse with our greatest friend in the world, the United States, and of course other countries as well. The Prime Minister does it, the Minister of Defense, even I do it, if possible, and we explain to them our need to continue the military operation. We have to understand we don't want to uproot people from their homes, to deport anybody. We want and we need to ensure our security, and we cannot allow to the Gaza Strip in its terrorist and military situation in the future, and we cannot allow them to regrow in a future reality, because things have changed here. We are going to obtain our objectives and explain it to the world. And of course, a humanitarian corridor we enable. That's important, and we'll continue to do so anywhere, wherever we act. Recently, Hamas has been enhancing its psychological warfare. Are you ready to say that in such a scenario we should have a death penalty for the terrorists? I hope we don't see such phenomena, and will do everything in order to prevent them from doing it. It's not a question of reaction. This is a war. We intend to continue with our attack, and we'll hit whoever we need to hit. I am in favor of killing all the terrorists, and all this dealing with death penalty, it's not fit for the time or the situation. It's not that this murderer or that murderer did it. We are fighting against an army of terrorists. In this situation, judging them, it's not relevant. And more than that, death penalty, even today, exists in the legal possibilities in the State of Israel. Now, we don't have to legislate anything. The military advocates can do it. They can do it tomorrow. But all this dealing is an attempt, unfortunate in my mind, at this mind, to deviate us from the main effort to fight our enemies and to gain some political gain. It's not fit for the time.
So this is Benny Gantz, former chief of staff and actually the most popular politician in Israel at the moment. He joined the Netanyahu government for the duration of the war, but Ambassador Ayalon is in a very delicate political situation right now because he's being already attacked by the Netanyahu base.
And he's trying to hold the sticks on both ends, not only by Netanyahu on the one hand, but also people from Lapid's party are attacking him for actually staying in the government in spite of the government doing politicking, especially with the budget allocation last night, or that was, again, I think most Israelis look at it in a very, very poor way. You know, instead of allocating all the money for the war efforts, then they're doing it for some coalition allocations that are political of nature. So basically, I think Gantz had to come out. I think it's a political statement more than a security statement, right, trying to actually explain to his constituency why he is staying in the government in spite the coalition money being allocated.
I have to differ here. I do not think that anyone responsible in this country or in this parliament would suggest that now this government has to break apart because of whatever political disagreements or budgetary issues when Israel is engaged in its most serious war since the Six-Day War. Let's keep everything in perspective.
All right.
No, well, this is exactly why Gantz is coming out to explain what you explain now.
And I don't think that even Lapid suggests that he should be breaking apart from this government right now.
Yeah, but there are some people who do, of course. What about the Bibas family? Gantz said that he has no confirmation.
The Israeli military is checking that statement of Hamas. One thing that comes out now and does raise some eyebrows is the fact that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to Israel's public broadcaster Kan, has met with the Bibas family yesterday and gave them some sort of update on the condition of the family. And we can remind our viewers again, we're talking about the mother Shiri and her two sons, Kfir, 10 months old, Ariel, 4 years old, and the father as well, Yarden, who is kept, we believe, in a separate facility. This is a very sensitive topic for the state of Israel as a whole. Kfir is the symbol of this war, this young baby, the toddler, being dragged from his home, these two redhead boys. There's no one person in Israel that doesn't think about them every day, that sees these pictures and doesn't wish for their safe return. I want to go back to a little bit to the statements from Gantz, but also from other political figures and military figures this evening. I'll read to you statements from the Chief of Staff this evening saying, "We know what to do and we are prepared for the next stage." Defense Minister Gantz says, "If anyone has any doubt, very soon we will continue the ground maneuver all over the Gaza Strip." Netanyahu says there is no situation in which we do not go back to fighting until the end. And Gantz just now saying the war would continue and expand to anywhere needed until safety is being returned, security is being returned. What is important here is the goal of Hamas in extending these negotiations forever and ever and reaching a situation in which the war stops is for Hamas wanting the situation to go back to October 6th, to again controlling the Gaza Strip, to skirmishes on the fence, to being able to fire rockets at Israel, as if nothing happened on October 7th. This is something that Israel would not be able to live with. And when we go back to politics, this government will have, you can question its validity right now, but regardless of the situation now, should this government not do whatever it takes to eliminate Hamas, as it promised to its voters, to the whole Israeli public, then it will have no right to exist. The state of Israel really will not have a right to exist if it cannot guarantee the safety of its citizens in their homes on the borders.
Right. With us now is Elan Tiv. Thank you very much for speaking with us tonight. Elan,
thank you.
You're the daughter of Aviva and Keith Siegel. Aviva, your mother, returned on November 26th. Your father is still in Gaza.
That's right.
What do you know about him?
Well, I know that they both of them were kidnapped on the October 7th from their house. And I know that they crossed the border when they were alive. And that's all I know about him or things that I can say on TV. And I really, really hope and wish and pray that the American government and Qatar and the Israeli government and the whole world wouldn't stop all the efforts until all of the people, all of the Israeli citizens in Gaza return home.
Were they, your parents, separated or held together? Can you say?
I can't say anything.
You can't say anything to that. Well, tell me, how was the reunion with your mother? Elan? Are you with? Tell me about your reunion and re-meeting with your mother.
Sorry, yes, I didn't hear you, sorry.
Yeah, I was asking about how was it to meet your mother again?
It was really, really exciting. It was almost unbelievable to see her walking and talking and alive, because we had so many moments that we didn't really knew if we will see her again. And with that being said, it was hard.
think we lost this connection, unfortunately. One of many, many stories of families that are torn apart, unbelievable. Back to you, Ilan, if you're with me. Ilan? No, it's unfortunately we lost it. Let's go, Ambassador Ilan, back to what's happening tonight. We have an ongoing exchange, actually. We've seen pictures from the Rafah crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt beforehand, but we haven't seen, Guy, any Red Cross vehicles or anything like that still.
There was some footage just of Hamas vehicles driving through the streets of Gaza next to Khan Yunis. There was an Egyptian confirmation about those Israelis, 10 as part of this deal, another 2 with Russian nationality that have been transferred into the hands of the International Red Cross. No confirmation yet on their arrival into Rafah crossing or meeting any Israeli officials. As we saw in the past 5 days, in the previous 5 days, this does take some time. And we know, sadly, from the hostages that came back, that the road in Gaza was not easy at all. In many cases, rocks were thrown at their cars. They felt like they may be lynched by the crowd as they were making their way into the border with Egypt. So there's all sorts of delays. Hamas obviously has to guarantee their safe return to Israel through the crossing and ensure that nothing happens to them for as long as that was even maintained while they were in captivity.
Right. And we have to stress again, so far the deal expires tonight. No
Correct.
word on an extension yet. I've seen reports coming in here from Israel that Hamas may present a list for tomorrow, even though there's not an agreement yet.
Yeah, so we heard Defense Minister Gantz saying today that we will exploit any opportunity to extend this current outline until we reach the end of that. This outline only refers to women and children. Up until now, before they're released, there are still 9 Israeli children, including the Bibas family, that are being held in Gaza. So Israel wants to exploit this opportunity to bring all of them back home, all of the women. We're still talking about well over 130 Israelis that are in Hamas captivity. When it will come to the next stages, when we speak about Israeli soldiers, that will be a whole different story, a whole different deal in which Hamas would think that it has the leverage over Israel and could demand a lot more than just releasing of prisoners. Hamas would demand the stopping of the war altogether, something that will be, according to Egyptian officials, would be something that will be hard to swallow for the Israelis, and I say here, more like a gag reflex for any Israeli to think about stopping this war before Hamas is eliminated.
Right, Ambassador Ilan, maybe an extension of 2-3 days is the easier part. When it comes to the harder choice later, what do you expect will happen here inside Israel?
Well, I think it's pretty much understood by everyone, including the Americans, especially the Americans, that stage 2 in the ground operation will start very soon. And to that effect, Blinken, the Secretary of Blinken, is coming here just like he did in the first days of the war. Basically, he's part and parcel of the war cabinet, and it's quite interesting to see how intimately the Americans are embedded in Israeli operations. And in that respect, I believe that they will set the blueprint of what will be the rules of engagements. And he already said, not to uproot civil populations, to minimize, of course, casualties, to continue, and this is very important, to continue the inflow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And with this given, I think the IDF will have a free hand. I'm not sure that the military operation will be a replica of what we saw until now.
That's the message from Biden and others at this point. Northern Gaza will not be the same as southern Gaza.
But also what I hear from the military, brass, is that they may do the job getting Hamas rooted with a different type of operations. Northern Gaza is not southern Gaza, and I think that first of all, the territory is smaller. First of all, it's much more dense, but I think we will see probably much more special ops than tanks.
Okay.
No. Just hearing from the control that we need to move on, but we're still waiting for confirmation on the arrival of those hostages into the hands of the Red Cross.
Let's go back to Elan Tiv. We spoke a minute ago, Elan, and you were telling me about meeting your mother, reuniting with her. How was that like?
Yeah, so I said it was really exciting to see my mom. It was almost unreal to see her walking and like meeting her and hearing all the things that she's been through for all those days that we were so worried. And with that, it was really painful not to see my dad with her.
Right. As we said, your father is still there in Gaza. What would be your message to everybody, to the world, about getting him out of there?
I want to say that my mom's return is out of big efforts from Qatar, from the US government, from the Israeli government. And I really, really want to ask all the world and the people that can make the pressure to say that every person that can come out of this horrible place. My mom said she was in a 50 days hell. We have to bring all of them home. We have to make it happen. They can't stay there, not even one more day. After I hear my mom's stories, they can't stay there, not even one more day.
How all of that affected your personal life for the past 54 days?
It's a completely different life. Like I don't even feel like it's my life. The last 51 days, 53 days. I just feel like it's a different reality. I don't know how we will pass this period of time and be stronger to go back to real life.
Elan, I wish you the best, and hopefully we'll have better news in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With us now is Rami Igra, former head of Mossad MIA unit. Thank you very much for joining us again, Rami. How do you see the next stage? At a certain point, this hostage deal will reach the very, very tough part. How do you see this?
The hostage deal is being orchestrated by the Hamas in order to survive. They don't really want anybody out of jail. What they really want is to survive. They want to go back to the 6th of October, and they want to go back to the paradigm of rounds with Israel every once in a while. They will shoot missiles at us, and once in a while, they will decide to do another 7th of October. This effort to get the hostages out at this time, in my mind, was a little bit premature, because the real thing that will move the Hamas is the pressure of the Israeli military. Once the Hamas starts feeling our breath at their neck, you will see much better deals going on. Israel has to go back into fighting. We do not have any other option. At the end of the day, we have 400,000 refugees in their own country. And not only that, we also cannot continue, we cannot conceive a life where over the border there will be an entity like the Hamas aspiring to demolish the Jewish state and to kill all of us. So at the end of the day, we don't have many choices. And the only real choice we have, which is in concert with the fact that we want to release everyone, is to go back into fighting and to accomplish what was set at the beginning. I don't think that this fighting will be much different than the fighting before. It's going to be slow. It's going to be methodical. It is there to eradicate piece by piece the Hamas operation. And let me remind all of us that Hamas right now is not defeated. It's not weakened. It is as strong as it was before. It's just underground.
Now, you see the families of the hostages, and obviously continuing the war may risk them. How do you balance those two elements?
You have to balance the families, and all our hearts goes to the families. There's not even a Jew in Israel that is not thinking daily about these hostages. But let me remind all of us, these families want to go back and live on the Gaza Strip border. They want to go back home. And they're not going to go anywhere, and this country is not going to continue if we don't finish the Hamas. So if you balance this country and the families, there are risks of war. I can also say that every day that passes, the Hamas reorganizes, re-strengthens, and this means more casualties to our soldiers that will be fighting there in the next couple of days. So how do you balance that?
We have more questions than answers. Rami Igra, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ambassador Ayalon, more questions than answers. It's very complicated.
It is complicated, but at the end of the day, it's not so complicated. It's complicated on the ground. But what it's not complicated is that everybody understands, including our best friends, the Americans, is that Hamas can no longer rule Gaza, that Israel will not go back to the 6th of October. Once this is the new paradigm, then within this, let's say, main objective, we can find a way, and it's very important for us to coordinate with the Americans. This is why I think it's a very, very good idea that Secretary Blinken is here. By the way, he's not the only one here. CENTCOM, the American Central Command, is following what's happening in Gaza very closely, including with having some representatives right here. And I think you can reason with them. They understand what is the operation means. They have their own experience in Mosul and Fallujah and Afghanistan. And I think that they are, from what I understand, quite impressed with the professionalism of the IDF, which is doing the job in the in the most effective way with minimal number of casualties. Still, the secretary is here, and the ground rules for operation of the second phase are being written right now.
All right, Guy, we have just under a minute to headline it all.
Still conflicting reports on whether all the Israeli hostages have been transferred to the hands of the Red Cross. For now, the only confirmation is regarding those two Israeli-Russian nationals were transferred by Hamas to the Red Cross as part of their appreciation of the so-called efforts of the Russian President Vladimir Putin for the Hamas causes. At the same time, we're expecting 10 Israelis, 5 children are part of them to be released this evening.
Right, 5 children and 7 women altogether.
Correct.
We are seeing now the Red Cross with these hostages, apparently. This is the feed we get from Gaza right now. And stay tuned for more special coverage here on I-24 News with Benito Levin momentarily.
This is Breaking News Edition. I'm Benita Levine. Another emotional day for the Israeli nation. The next set of Israeli hostages is heading home after being held captive by Hamas for more than 7 weeks since the terror onslaught on the 7th of October. They have been handed over to the Red Cross, and Red Cross vehicles have been seen driving through the Rafah crossing just moments ago. Now, it's the final day of a truce deal, a truce that may be extended again, this time by 4 days. Day 54 of the war. Today's list of 10 hostages is said to include women and teenage girls and boys. The Bibas family are not on the list, and the IDF is looking into what it calls a cruel claim by Hamas that mother Shiri and her sons, the youngest hostage, 10-month-old Kfir Bibas and 4-year-old Ariel Bibas, have been killed. The IDF says Hamas bears responsibility for the safety of all the hostages, even if Hamas did in fact hand the Bibas family to another terror faction in Khan Yunis. Now, while families wait to receive the freed hostages, at this hour, 155 people remain in captivity, including 9 children. Earlier, Hamas saying in a short statement that they had released 2 Russian-Israeli hostages as a gesture to President Vladimir Putin. They were handed over to the Red Cross earlier. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu is reiterating that Israel will fight against Hamas until the end. Our correspondent Nicole Zedek is now at a hotel at the Dead Sea, so let's find out the latest there, because Nicole, thousands of Israelis have had to evacuate their homes, of course, since the 7th of October. Many don't know when they'll be able to go back. Tell us more. What is happening there?
Many don't know when they'll be able to go back, but more importantly, they're waiting to see who's going to be coming back with them. I'm with these residents that have evacuated from Kibbutz Be'eri, and more than 24 of their community members were kidnapped. Now, as you can see behind me here, they are anxiously watching that feed as you're talking about some of the first images of the Red Cross. You can't even see as people are standing up in their chairs. Dozens of these communities who have been uplifted from their homes in Kibbutz Be'eri. They've been staying here at the David Dead Sea Resort and Spa for more than 50 days now. Nearly 2 months they've been outside of their homes, but you can see this is a symbol of just how strong that community is, because although they might not be in their home in the south, they are all still together. All of them that are still here, I have to add, because that's why the energy in this room is so tense, because so far over the past 5 days they have been able to welcome home 12 of their community members. However, as I said, more than 24 were originally abducted, taken captive from their southern kibbutz community, and so they're hoping to see the faces. So we're getting these initial images to see if more are going to be coming home tonight, coming home back to their community, able to see their loved ones for the first time. And so it's truly a mixed bag of emotions, because excited is not the right word, Benita, but hopeful. That is certainly the energy that we're seeing here tonight.
Hopeful indeed. We wait for confirmation. Thank you so much. For now, our correspondent Nicole Zedek at a hotel in the Dead Sea. Thanks, Nicole. Now we welcome to studio Evacuee Dayan, former Israeli consul in Los Angeles, and our senior editor, Guy Azriel. Thank you both so much for being here. Another tense day, another emotional day. Let's start with you, Guy. What update can you share?
First, happy confirmation about the 2 Israeli-Russian nationals that have been transferred into Egyptian territory at this moment. We're speaking about Yelena Trufanov. She's 50 years of age, and Irena Tati, 73 years old. Both of them are now making their way into Israeli territory after already being at the hands of the Red Cross, as we still await the return of the remaining 10 Israelis that are being transferred at this hour into the hands of the Red Cross. 5 of them children, and the remaining 5 women of various ages.
And of course, it's always important. Every single life is important. Every single person is important. But Evacuee, the nation, hoping, of course, for all the children to be freed. Your take on what is unfolding right now?
Absolutely. I think that the two Israeli Russians that are being released right now is another demonstration that at the end of the day, the negotiations between Hamas and Israel was extremely successful, because what Hamas tried to do is to release only the ones who have foreign nationality, foreign passports. We refuse to that, and as we see, Israelis are being released first and foremost, regardless to their nationality. Now, regarding the children, by all means, I mean, this is we are so hopeful that the Bibas family is still alive, and this is only a psychological warfare. I think that there are still 10 more kids that are in captivity and hostage taken, and out of them 7 are going to be released today. So we still have a few more taken hostage, and hopefully they will be released as soon as possible, and the others as well. But the children is first and foremost. And if the Bibas family or I would say that the entire responsibility on the Bibas family is of the Hamas, and they cannot say that it's the Islamic Jihad or any other organization, because we see that they work hand in hand with the Islamic Jihad and other terrorist organizations in Gaza. So it's their responsibility to make sure that the Bibas family is alive and back to Israel.
And you can pass the responsibility within the terror factions within the Gaza Strip, but let's just remind the world that this all happened because of the terror onslaught, and civilians ranging in age from a 9-month-old baby to elderly Holocaust survivors were abducted and have been held in captivity for more than 7 weeks. It is unimaginable. Stay with us. We've got much more to discuss, because we're looking at the physical and psychological recovery for these freed hostages, and it's obviously going to take time as details emerge already around the conditions in which they have been held, the tunnels, moving to different locations, the food they were given, and of course, the fear. Here's more from Professor Dror Mandel from the Surreal Medical Center.
The children are in stable physical condition. They are presenting various medical challenges and also psychosocial challenges that we are attending to. Most of them are expected to be released in the coming days to their places of accommodation, except one child who has required longer medical treatment followed by rehabilitation.
We're evaluating them for the weight loss, which is about 10 to 17% of body weight for most of them. And then for deficiencies, everybody are getting supplements to start with, and then tailored with the specific types of deficiencies that they have. And we're going to follow this up, but this has a meaning, especially in pediatrics, and the consequences of such undernutrition for such a long time, for more than 50 days.
Horrendous accounts from captivity. We will unpack more of it, but right now we go to our correspondent Zach Anders, and he joins us from Sheba Hospital in Ramat Gan. So we're talking about these 12 hostages coming back home, including adults and teenagers. This is, of course, the 6th group to be set free since the truce started on Friday. Zach, what kinds of preparations are underway there right now as these hostages are heading home?
And the hospital staff director spoke with the media earlier and said they expect 4 here at Sheba Medical Center, but that could change. It is dependent on when this handover takes place. The initial care team that's at the border that will begin the assessment will then be able to radio ahead to the hospitals here in Tel Aviv, potentially hospitals closer if that's necessary, and be able to communicate what exactly is needed. But at the very baseline, the staff here is prepared and the rooms are ready. They're expecting to receive a handful at least. They could, in theory, take all of them if that was the case, but they have been split up by team into different hospitals in Tel Aviv. The additional level of care that takes place here is almost, it's unique to this situation. It's unique to what they're experiencing, because they are pulling in experts from all fields of medicine, preparing for what's been described to me as a slow reentry. They don't want to begin to psychologically begin to poke or prod too deep. They want everyone to feel comfortable and adjust to their surroundings and have the opportunity to get a good meal and to spend time with their families before they are subjected to the tests and the blood work and the sort of things that will happen over the coming days. But in the short term, if it doesn't appear to be necessary, it does sound like from the hospital staff, as they've communicated to us, that they don't want to inundate with all of their medical skills all at once, that this is paced out and that they do every effort they can to make everyone feel comfortable.
Thank you so much. We will be coming back to our correspondent Zach Anders at Sheba Hospital. Thank you for now. Still in studio, Evacuee Dayan, Guy Azriel, and now joining us as well, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Doron Avital, former commander in the Special Forces in the IDF. So, Doron, I want to come to you because this process is underway, and it's now a process that we're getting used to as a nation. It's happened several nights in a row. Do you believe, in terms of the Israeli side, this is working and the truce as such needs to be extended so each day another set of hostages can make their way out of captivity back to Israel?
As long as those exchanges are in those terms, I think the Israeli public and the government and the army, the military, think that we should continue. And of course we are prepared to continue the campaign when it's needed. I saw Herzi approving the plans, the battle plans of the commander of the South, so we are ready. As long as there's exchanges, we wait. But I think it's working from our perspective.
What does that look like, though? Let's say there is a truce extension for 4 days, more sets of hostages come, but not everybody is back home, and Israel says the fighting will resume.
As long as it's a question of days, this is something that we can contain. Of course, the greatest dilemma would be when we'll come to the soldiers, and then the price will be a different price, and then there will be a real dilemma for the decision makers, to the military, in terms of the horizon of the campaign, and even the price that we would have to pay. This would be a serious dilemma. In terms of women and kids, we have to do whatever we can to bring them home and then see what's up.
So we heard Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying today that we will do everything in our power to fulfill this outline of releasing those women and children. Having said that, the extension of this pause in the fighting is a prime interest of Hamas. As far as Hamas is concerned, every day of this pause brings them closer to the ideal of stopping this war altogether. This is the ultimate goal of Hamas with these ongoing delays and the ceasefire or pause in the fighting. Hamas, as it sees it, has 2 cards. The first is the international pressure on Israel to stop the fighting, and we see that only to a very certain extent. What Israel really cares about is what the Americans are saying, and for now it does seem the Americans really understand what Israel is dealing with here. The other one, of course, is the hostages, and once we complete this mission of returning all the children and those women, the next stage will be the Israeli soldiers in Hamas's hands. We do not know the exact number of that, but quite a substantial number of those. When it comes to the return of the soldiers, Hamas is not going to demand just the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners, but also the complete halt of the Israeli war in Gaza, and that is something that the Israeli government and the Israeli public will not agree to.
And that's something we will unpack in a while. But Evacuee, I'd like your take. No one knows better than the pressure coming from the United States that Guy referred to. Give us a sense of how that is impacting the decisions that Israel needs to be making right now.
So I would say that there are a few tactical disagreements that we have with the Americans, and there is one major strategic disagreement we have with the Americans. But at the end of the day, and I'll say what they are, but at the end of the day, there is a complete understanding that the military power and the administrative power of the Hamas both should be eradicated. And it's agreed by the Americans and the Israelis, and there is no doubt that the war is going to continue. Now, when we speak about the tactical disagreements, the humanitarian supply, that including gasoline and all of that, that was a disagreement that Israel eventually accepted the conditions conditions that the Americans set. That was the first. The second one, which Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is coming tomorrow, and he will insist, is that when the war resumes, the entire fighting is going to look differently in the south than the north, which means it's going to be much more, I would say, concentrated or less broader war than it was conducted in the north. Here we have a major disagreement, and I can tell you that as one who has 2 kids in Gaza now, I can tell you that we should definitely reject the American request about the South, and we are speaking about the strategic disagreement that we have is obviously about the day after, because the Americans already speak about the 2-state solution and all of that. But what Israel is saying, and rightly so, is beside the fact that there is no one now credible partner in the Palestinian Authority, within the Palestinian Authority, then can take over Gaza. Hamas is only the tactical problem of the region. Iran is the strategic problem of the region, and if we want to make a significant change in the region, we have to deal not only with the Palestinians or not only with the Palestinian issue, but rather with the Iranians as well.
Something we're going to talk about in a very short while. Gentlemen, stay with us. We've got dramatic images on our screen right now. You can see something we've seen several nights in a row now, and you can see these ambulances waiting for the hostages to be freed and handed over. Obviously, there will be medical tests immediately. Let's find out exactly what it entails. We bring in our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osura, and he brings us the latest from Urim Junction. Ariel, what is happening where you are? What can you tell us about the process for these hostages to come back home?
Right, Benita. So a lot of anticipation here in Urim Junction, where in a few hours' time, the convoy bringing home the 12 Israeli hostages who are expected to be released by Hamas. 2 Israeli Russians have been already released. That is according to the IDF, saying that according to information that it has, the 2 women, Yelena Tropanov and Irena Tati, they have been handed over to the Red Cross and are on their way to Israeli territory. Still no official confirmation or announcement regarding the remaining 10, 5 women and 5 children expected to be released in this 6th wave, 6th group of hostages to be released. Now, as for the process, usually as it's been going on until now over in the 5 previous rounds, there is an expected announcement that they are handed over to the Red Cross, then that they have arrived in Israeli hands after crossing through the Rafah border crossing into Egypt. Those images that you were talking about earlier, I imagine those are the Egyptian ambulances on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing. But prior to that, the hostages still have to be handed over to the International Red Cross. And as of now, we have not received word that that has happened. But once they are handed over to the Red Cross as expected, then travel through the Rafah border crossing into Egypt, they'll be greeted by a IDF group of officials who will give them an initial examination and then bring them over across the border to Israel. From there, they will travel to Qatari Air Base and expected to pass through Urim Junction, where I am standing right now. After that, they'll be airlifted to hospitals in central Israel for further medical examination. But also, in addition to that, as important, if not less, the much anticipated reunification with their families. We've seen heart-filling and heartwarming images over these past 5 days of these much anticipated unifications, and so hopefully those will be images that we will see this evening sooner rather than later.
And And we just saw an image moments ago of a vehicle going past, a Red Cross vehicle, 2 Israeli Russians inside, to reiterate that the Russians who have been freed are Israeli Russian citizens, and they have been freed a little bit earlier than the other group of hostages. As soon as we get an update, we will be coming back, of course, to our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osaran, for the latest there from Urim Junction. Thank you so much. And we wait for that moment when we can see the families reunited. Thank you so much, Ariel. Yaki Dayan, I want to come back to you about exactly that, because we see these beautiful moments of families being reunited, but there are a range of emotions, because at the same time, a lot of these people have been in captivity and haven't any idea of exactly what unfolded on the 7th of October, and some of them have had to find out that their loved ones were killed 7 weeks ago. It's beyond devastating.
Beyond. This is sadness mixed with happiness, because many of the hostages lost their family members, and they are coming back to split families, broken families. It's a long battle, uphill battle, psychological one as physical one. So, but you know, the good thing is that as an Israeli society, we are extremely united now, and they are being embraced by all the people, and I'm sure that they will be helped a lot. But anyhow, it's going to be an uphill battle all the time. We have to remember that we are dealing with monsters, with a terrorist organization that slaughtered, raped, beheaded people on October 7th, and not only that, but treated the hostages badly. They are not letting Red Crescent enter and see those hostages. Just yesterday, an old lady came back and she's fighting, or 2 days ago, she's fighting for her life.
She had no medication for 7 weeks.
Exactly. She was badly treated over there, and she was 84. She's 84, so hopefully she'll survive that, and we are wishing her all the best. But we have to remember that those moments are moments of happiness, but they are definitely mixed with a lot of sadness. People that are still in captivity, and people that lost their beloved ones.
And just to illustrate what Yaki said just here, when we speak about these 2 hostages that are being released today, well, Yelena Trupanov, first of all, both of them are residents of Nir Oz, kibbutz Nir Oz. Yelena was kidnapped together with her son and his partner. Both of them are still in captivity. And as for Irena, she was kidnapped while her husband was slaughtered in front of her eyes, just to illustrate the extremely terrible reality that both of them have to deal with, one of them losing her husband, the other one knowing that her son and his partner are still in Hamas captivity, and no word about when will they be able to see daylight at all, not to speak about coming back to Israel.
Doron, from a strategic point of view, we talk about Hamas manipulating Israelis, lying, the videos, the games, putting people on a list and then they don't appear, reporting that an elderly woman had died in captivity days ago, only for her to be on a list of the hostages freed. The mental games, and now we add in the Bibas family and the way this has been handled, the cruel claim from Hamas that they have been killed. It is not confirmed. Israel is unable to confirm it at the point. But talk to us about that Hamas strategy of duping the public over and above the trauma we've been discussing here.
I think Hamas doesn't only play in the battlefield, it plays in the public opinion field, it plays with the psyche of the Israeli society. I think also Hezbollah, the idea was to crack the Israeli society from within. We saw the rift in the Israeli society in the last year or so, and they were thinking this is the crack where they can enter, and they keep doing it, also with those psychological manipulation, trying to put a wedge between those 2 aims of the war, defeating Hamas and releasing the hostages, and using the leverage of releasing the hostages and preventing the possibility that we'll continue the campaign and defeat them in the end. So this is a cruel enemy. We have to be cool-headed when we play with those players. I mean, the pain is real, but we have to be strategic players and know how to win this campaign.
And they certainly knew that the Bibas family had become a symbol, and specifically baby, a 9-month-old baby, Kfir Bibas, had become the symbol of what had happened here. And it's blatantly obvious that every Israeli wants to see this child survive, wants to see this family come home, to be safe and just to live their life.
You're so right, Benita. I mean, they became a symbol, the Bibas family. The 10-month-old redhead, beautiful baby, and the family, they all became a symbol in Israel, and the Hamas knows it extremely well. They're playing with, as Doron mentioned, they're playing with the minds of the Israelis. It's a psychological warfare. We should be ready that this kind of warfare will continue. Already they declared about one of the hostages that she was killed, and eventually she came back. We were very happy to see that, but we have to remember that those are the monsters that we are dealing day in and day out, and we should be ready for that. That's part of the negotiations with those monsters.
Yes, exactly. I think if these news would sadly turn out to be correct, and as we know, the Bibas family was captured while they were all on their feet. The mother was holding her two sons in her hands, as we can see here. All were safe and sound when they were taken away. If they were murdered by Hamas, and you know, Hamas attempts to claim that they were killed as a result of an Israeli airstrike. That's part of the lies that Hamas continues to tell, as it did in the case of Hana, one of the hostages that they said has died and eventually returned to Israel. If that turns out to be correct, that would cause a lot of pain, a lot of anger in Israel. But beyond everything, it will be another reminder for Israel, but I think for the entire world as well, as to what Israel is fighting against what sort of evil Israel is trying to eliminate, the evil of Hamas.
And it's an evil that has several layers as well, because over and above what we're discussing right now, Yaki, something you alluded to a short while ago, the Red Cross activity or lack of activity. In itself, the Red Cross didn't get to Kfir Bibas, a 9-month-old baby, now 10 months old. Didn't get to elderly people, didn't get to people who were sick. It's unacceptable. You work on the international arena. How was this allowed to happen for 7 weeks?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Red Cross is really serving as a get taxi, as a taxi company, just transporting the hostages from one place to the other. The whole idea of the Red Cross and being supported by Switzerland, that this is a neutral organization that should get a process to any hostage wherever he is. And this is not the case here. We have to remember that we are dealing with a very cruel terrorist organization, and it's extremely hard, but nevertheless, we don't hear the Red Cross claiming against the Hamas. So yes, they have to deal with that, but with them. But nevertheless, they have to do their work and insist on that and call the word upon if the Hamas is not letting them, and not just serve as a taxi company driving the hostages from Gaza to the Rafah crossing point.
And very, very briefly, talk to us about the women's rights groups, the human rights groups. Where were they? And I'm talking about specifically in the US, Yaki.
And not only in the US and the UN organizations. Women were raped, were brutally mutilated. Horrible things happened on the 7th, and we hear again and again about women right groups and all kinds of groups in the US and in Canada and in other places just not recognizing that such things happened. They are denying the truth. They are rape deniers, although that their whole issue is to defend women, and this is very unfortunate. And I see that as a combination of a lot of anti-Semitism. It's aimed against Israel, and it is also a combination of ignorance, and it's a pity. It's a pity because eventually it shows how the UN in general and those organizations specifically are not playing a fair game when it comes to Israel and to Jewish women.
Raises so many questions. Yaki Dayan, thank you very much for joining us here in studio. Always appreciate your insights. Guy and Doron are going to stay with us, and we are expecting that daily update, that briefing from the IDF's Daniel Hagari. It should be happening soon. If and when it does happen, we will, of course, bring it to you live, so make sure you stay tuned to this breaking news edition. Now, as discussions continue over that possible extension to this current truce, which we've been discussing here in studio, and questions are asked about the day after the war, which we've also been discussing, many are still asking how the Israeli intelligence community were blindsided by the Hamas terror assault in southern Israel on the 7th of October. More than 1,200 people were killed and thousands wounded at that music festival, in their homes and on bases. Plus, more than 240 people were abducted on that day. Our senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev has more in this report.
The Israeli intelligence community, seen by many as the best in the world, filled with talented people and outstanding resources, but as we now learn, also filled with plenty of arrogance.
Leaders of Hamas being interviewed 3 or 4 days before the attack, saying that we are going to attack in a few days the whole area. So, I mean, where were the people there? Were they asleep? Were they absent?
As opposed to the previous thought, there was no intelligence regarding the widespread attack of October 7th. Various reports in Israeli media now suggest sources within the intelligence community, coming from the esteemed A200 unit, warned about it, but were ignored. They even heard communication in Hamas drills saying, "We killed the entire kibbutz." Why were they ignored? The reports suggest those warnings were not high-ranking officers, and those above them ignored the warning, saying there's no chance Hamas will attack. For those who were part of this community, the behavior of the high-ranking officers is far from surprising.
Vanity, vanity, vanity. I know all. I know better than you. Who are you, a sergeant, to tell me that the Hamas is going to attack? I am the responsible.
Cynically enough, October 7th came 50 years and a day after the previous time Israel was surprised in similar circumstances. Junior officers presented plenty of evidence of an incoming attack just ahead of the Yom Kippur War, but those above them refused to listen. The people who fought back then gave their advice to the current commanders, but were also ignored.
We must never think that we know everything and that we are protected from everything. We should always be worried and careful.
50 years later, the lessons were clearly not learned.
Many questions still remain unanswered. So, to that point, here in studio still, Senior Editor Guy Azriel, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Doron Avital, former Commander in the Special Forces in the IDF, and we now welcome Colonel in the Reserves Itamar Yair, former Deputy Head in the Israeli National Security Council and Director of the Commanders for Israel's Security. Thank you so much for being here, and I'd like to start with you and your take on this developing situation. As we speak, we are seeing the sixth set or group of hostages on their way back to Israel, having been in captivity for more than 7 weeks. And at hand is the discussion over a potential extension to this current truce for another 4 days. Is that a good idea?
I believe it's a good idea for both sides.
Tell us why.
The Israeli side have an interest to release as many hostages that we can get back. More than that, I think that the Hamas have a very strong interest to have another day or two, and even many more days, to try to organize itself, to try to cover things that they don't want us to know, to try to reorganize some of the units, to try to nominate new commanders to those units that lost their commanders. And they believe, on top of all that, that as far as we will wait with another ground operation, the end game will be that somebody will stop us from going ahead for good, and this is exactly what the Hamas is looking for.
How concerned are you, though, about the Palestinian security prisoners who are being released from Israeli jails at the same time, heading back to the West Bank, heading back to East Jerusalem? What kind of concern does that raise for you at this juncture?
It is a concern, but it's not a very serious concern compared to other threats that we have. I think that those that will survive or will be in the West Bank will be under real, I would say, even some kind of control of the Israeli intelligence, and they understand very well that once they will even dream about joining again all kind of terrorist activities, they will be stopped long before. And we need to remember that during their time in jail, they don't play games only. They speak with each other, they develop themselves, they organize themselves. So a prison is not really, objective place to.
I'm going to stop you right now because we were just looking at images on our screen. These are the latest images of the current group of hostages. You can see them. It's a scene we have seen all too often. Armed men, masked men, Hamas terrorists, jeering crowds. You can see these women being escorted into a vehicle. You can see a Red Cross assistant, so to speak, from the images we can see right now, and we can see the waving. It's become almost farcical, looking at hostages who've been held captive for this time, waving at armed, masked terrorists. Doron Avital, talk to us about what we're looking at right now.
No, we've been talking about the psychological campaign of Hamas. This is really orchestrated like a Hollywood movie. You see the players, you see those Hamas players, you see the crowd. This is placed for their advantage in terms of what they want to show to the Arabic world, to the civilians in Gaza, and to the people maybe on the West Bank. So this is really their sign of victory. But of course, we'll meet them in the battlefield, and we hope it will end differently.
You really ask yourself, how is Hamas expecting this to be good PR for itself, as we see how heavily armed those terrorists are, with their face covered. But beyond that, look at the masses around those two poor hostages that are being released now. There's other footage showing hundreds, perhaps thousands of Gazans. Here you have it, surrounding their cars. You can just imagine what sort of fear they're experiencing. All the curiosity for that, for those Jewish hostages there in those cars, the masses surrounding the cars. And we heard the other hostages that were released saying they feared for their life. They feared that they're about to be lynched. And this is perhaps the most surreal situation here, where these Hamas terrorists, those who captured them, those who slaughtered over 1,200 Israelis, are the ones now having to protect them from the crowd of Gazan so-called civilians, so-called uninvolved civilians, who are also looking to get their hands on those Israeli captives. It is a completely surreal situation, and what horror for these two women as they hope to make their way into Israeli territory. We know in this case of these two Israeli-Russian nationals, there are already outside of Gaza, in Egypt, on the way to the Israeli border.
If I may, I have another point. Looking at these pictures, I am worried that the Hamas it will become some kind of excuse for the Hamas to say that they have difficulties to release more hostages. And they might say that the crowd stopped them from doing it, push them not to do it. There is a risk. They are not ready to do it now. They will delay it. Let's see what will come next. Because every day we saw this crowd bigger and bigger and bigger, and nothing is real there. It's all of it is well planned by the Hamas.
And look at the faces of these women in the vehicle waving again. It's something we've seen each night. These hostages ostensibly waving at their captors. It is, as I said before, farcical to think how this is all being staged. But can you imagine the fear? First of all, we don't know what these women have been told. We don't know if they are fully briefed about exactly what is happening and that they are about to come safely back to Israel. And can you imagine seeing a crowd like that, the shouting, the jeering, the flags and the phones? Also, Doron, your take, we saw in recent days it's not just Hamas, there are other terror organizations front and center as this unfolds?
Islamic Jihad, for sure. And also, we are not sure about hostages that are located among civilians. Also, I think it's a show for Hamas to indicate that the civilians are with them, because we are all the time trying to say, well, there's Hamas, there's the civilians, we don't hurt civilians. They want to say we are the true representative of...
I think that all of us understand it's a show.
It's a show. And yesterday we saw Islamic Jihad terrorists together with these Hamas terrorists actually kissing each other in some show, a twisted show of solidarity.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
the only good indication, in the good quote-unquote indication for us, that Hamas has command on the territories in terms of other exchanges, that he can command the Islamic Jihad to bring him the hostages. I hope so. So if we have the other deals, that we can so-called trust him, that he can execute what he promises or what is agreed upon.
We need to remember that all these, or most of these hostages, still have husbands and fathers
inside,
still in captivity,
and they understand that if they will not follow exactly those that they got, and we know that the previous hostages that were released got messages to wave and to say that they got very good treatment. Remember, these people know that the relatives are still there, and everybody, and they were told, we watch you. And we heard yesterday that they told the children that if they will not well behave, they know exactly where they live, and they will come and kill them at home.
First of all, confirmation from the IDF now that these two Israeli Russians are in Israeli territory together with IDF.
I'm going to stop you because Daniel Hagari is about to speak, the IDF spokesperson.
They're now undergoing initial medical examination, and they will be transferred to the hospital where they will meet their families. We continue to advance this evening to fulfill the outline to return the hostages as agreed upon. Dear families, it is difficult to imagine the pressure and uncertainty you're feeling. Our hearts are with you. We will update you with any information that comes to our knowledge, and then we'll update the public this evening and in the coming days. Hamas still holds 159 hostages taken on October 7th. As we explained, this is an updated number based on intelligence information and the missing, and the number of missing that is changing as well, according to the information and the examinations that we're making. We give it to the families, and now I am updating this to you here. Please do not spread unverified information and rumors. Stick to the reports of IDF spokesmen. We examine every piece of information, validity of the information that Hamas publishes this evening as well. But regards to the Bibas family, we are in constant contact with the family. The responsibility for the safety of all the hostages is fully on the Hamas terror group. Hamas endangers the hostages, including women and children, that must be returned. We operate in all the intelligence and operational means in order to return the hostages home. IDF fighters are set in the pause lines in Gaza. They took down 3 terrorists who posed a threat to our forces and violated the pause. Over the night, we investigated the forces, and we understand that they struck the forces that threw the explosive at them yesterday. And today we took down terrorists. The IDF troops continue to operate with determination against any threat. In a joint operation of the IDF, the Shin Bet, and border police, fighters took down Mohammed Zbeidi, a senior commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The IDF, together with the security groups, operates on all fronts. We will operate against any threat. The IDF is ready to fight and fulfill the goals of the war in Gaza. The Chief of Staff has coordinated a security assessment in the northern front with the readiness for the remaining stages of the war. The IDF is ready today for the rest of the war. I call you, the public, to continue to follow the guidelines, especially at this time where we don't hear sirens in recent days. I call on you to follow the guidelines. Remember that this can change any moment. These instructions save life. Questions? Are there indications that Hamas is lying about the Bibas family? If no order is being given about the pause, when would this fighting resume? We are set both to renew the fighting and to continue the outline. For as long as we can return hostages according to, as we did in the past several days, we will do so. But if that will not be possible, our forces are ready to continue and fight. We will be ready to do so at any time. I say again, there can be a violation. I want to make it clear to the public, we are ready to continue the fighting now. If there is a violation, we are ready. As if there is no outline of a pause tomorrow, we are ready to continue fighting. But as long as we can return hostages, and there are still women and children, as was agreed upon, that can be returned, we will be set with our operational forces to fulfill this outline. This is a top priority at this stage. As for Bibas family, as we mentioned here, the responsibility for the Bibas family is on the Hamas terror group. Hamas carries the responsibility. We have updated that they are responsible for the hostages. There are negotiators, there are other players, and we agreed on women and children. The responsibility for the Bibas family is on Hamas, as they do for the rest of the hostages. We examine every information, and we'll continue to examine it. We've updated the family, and only after we did so, we've given a notice to the media, and we'll continue to do so. Regarding the release of hostages, is there information about the fact that why did the Red Cross not access the other Israelis? We said several times that we call on the world to demand of the Red Cross, as it does in every other place, in another case, to visit and see the hostages. Hamas is a cruel terror group and murderous one. It does not listen to the instructions or the way it happens in the world. We'll continue to demand this. It is the responsibility of the world. I say this again, the Red Cross is making efforts, but we must demand of Hamas to allow the Red Cross to see hostages and ensure their well-being. This is its duty, as it does in other countries. The Red Cross aids in assisting the hostages out. This is not something to be taken for granted. It is complicated, and it does so in a good manner. Thank you.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari at his daily briefing and taking questions there from the media, many pressing questions. Colonel in the Reserves, Itamar Ya'ar, what stood out for you? That briefing is important. I want to get specifically to start to the Bibas family and what Israel knows and what Israel is going to do.
I don't know anything that the chief of staff and IDF spokesman doesn't know. But I don't believe any word that comes out of Hamas people, for good and for bad. It's very clear that Hamas tried to play all kind of psychological war against us. I will not be surprised that they will be found as 2 days ago, some ladies were found short time after the Hamas announced that they have no idea where exactly they are. It's a show, it's a play, and it's a very crucial play that the Hamas play with us, with the families. It's not human. I think that every word that we will use is not strong enough. Related to what was said about the Red Cross, again, I'm not surprised. I would like to remind us and everybody that Israeli prisoners in the hands of the Hamas didn't see any Red Cross representative for 5 years and more. Gilad Shalit was in Hamas hands for I believe 5 years and 4 months. Yeah. He didn't see any Red Cross guy. To be frank, I don't blame Red Cross, because Red Cross is not a military group that can force anybody to do anything. What we see is that Hamas don't play according to any kind of international law, any kind of human base. And again, my expectations from the Hamas is so low that I'm not surprised by that as well.
That said, what is different this time round is that of the hostages, and we're hearing the update from Daniel Hagari now, 159 hostages, they come from a range of countries, and the pressure in terms of the United States has been real, and there could have been a lot of pressure on Qatar, who have been hosting some of the leaders of Hamas in great luxury from what we understand, and are brokering these deals as well. Surely Doha could have put pressure on the Red Cross and said, get your ducks in a row.
I'm sure that every time that President Biden speaks with the Qatari leaders, the Prime Minister and the others, he mentioned it and he tried to push them and to press them. But Qatar, and again, it's not a surprise, Qatar is some kind of a state that tried to play games with everybody. One day they work for the Iranians, the other day they work with the Americans. Only to remind us, the biggest US military site in the Middle East is located in Qatar. They try to become some kind of the leader of the Middle East and the leader of the Arab world. And they are in a competition with Egypt, and we see it in this case. They're in competition with Saudi, they're competition with everybody, and they try to play the game. Now, from the other side, the Americans and even us try to be polite with them. Why? Only because it's not the case that we like them. It's because we need them. And they are effective, in a sense, on releasing hostages. And in this case, I think it's fair to do it.
I want your take as well, because I know you're going to be leaving us shortly, about mention being made of this pause being violated and what it means in terms of the hostage release that hopefully could happen over the next few days. If there is another violation, if there is fighting, some kind of incident inside Gaza, what does that mean for the deal that could be extended as we speak?
I don't have a very clear answer. I think that case by case, the commanders on the ground and the high-level decision makers will have to handle the situation and will have to take the decisions. And I'm sure that the Hamas understand that they can't expect to understand exactly what will be the Israeli response of every violation. But we all need to know that even if the two sides, and there are more than two sides in this case, there are many players on the ground, what makes the whole story much more complicated. But even if at least Hamas and Israel have a similar interest to go on with this kind of day-by-day agreement, if I may, even though it's not there is no signature anywhere, but with this kind of understanding, I would say, Even though these are the interests of the two sides, it doesn't mean that miscalculation of one side can't explode everything. We saw similar situations with Hezbollah. We saw this kind of things. War and fighting is the world of unknown. We need to remember it. It's not something that you can plan and then to expect that everything will go according to your plan. And we need to deal with it or the Israeli side need to deal with it as good as possible.
And lastly, you made mention of Hezbollah, and obviously it has been quiet on that front during the time of this truce, but it still is simmering up there. How worried are you if this extension ends, if this deal comes to an end and fighting does resume, as Benjamin Netanyahu says, they are ready to continue fighting when this is over and to eliminate Hamas? How concerned are you about what Hezbollah might decide to do next?
I said in this studio, together with some of the colleagues here, weeks ago, that the chances that Hezbollah will join the celebration, so-called, is not very high. And the main reason for it is, there are two main reasons. First of all, because on the tactical level, I would say, or the operational level, the Hamas took from Hezbollah one of the major elements of Hezbollah plans. And this is the whole issue of surprising the Israeli side.
No time to surprise now.
And the Israeli side is much more ready now compared to what the Hezbollah had in his plans. But there is a strategic issue as well. I think that for the Iranians, and there are those that try to, organize the whole scene. The Iranians are not happy, but they agree to lead Hamas or to close even an eye on Hamas activities because Hamas is important for them, but it's a very specific kind of importance. The story between Iran and Hezbollah is much different. Hezbollah is much more important for the Iranians because Hezbollah is there as part of the whole line: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and the Mediterranean. And the Iranians will not lose Hezbollah because Hamas opened fire one day. And this is the main difference. And because of that,